Elvis Presley stared at the script in his hand, but the words blurred into an unreadable mess. Another movie, another formula, another forgettable soundtrack. He was tired, bone-weary, and the California sun beating down on the studio lot felt less like warmth and more like an oppressive weight. It was 1968, and the magic felt like it had been sucked out of everything. The music he loved, the acting he'd once dreamed of doing, it all felt like a machine now. A big grinding machine that chewed him up and spit him out a little bit more hollow each time. He was Elvis, the biggest star in the world, adored by millions. But sometimes he felt like a bird in a gilded cage, singing the same song over and over just because the cage was so pretty. He was on the set of his latest film, The Trouble with Girls. Not the worst title, he supposed, but not exactly King Creole either. That was a different lifetime when he'd actually felt like an actor, like he was creating something. Now, he mostly just stood where he was told, sang the songs they gave him, and tried to look charming. It paid the bills, sure. It kept the machine running, but a deep ache of something missing was always there. "Elvis, we're ready for you, darling," a bubbly assistant called out, her voice too cheerful for the oppressive heat. He forced a smile, the kind he knew people expected the Elvis smile. "Be right there, animal." As he walked towards the set, a replica of a fairground, he caught a glimpse of himself in a stray mirror. The slicked back hair, the perfect sideburns, the tailored shirt. He looked like Elvis. He felt like a stranger in his own skin. Today was a new scene, and he had a new co-star. He barely glanced at the casting list. They all blended together anyway. Beautiful women, often sweet, always a little starstruck. He knew the drill. Polite smiles, a little flirting for the cameras, then back to his lonely trailer. He walked onto the set, the noise of the crew and equipment a dull hum in his ears. The director, a harried man named Peter, waved him over. "Elvis." Good, this is Clara Hayes." "She'll be plexi." Elvis turned, and there she was. Clara Hayes wasn't what he expected. She wasn't one of the usual Hollywood bombshells. She wasn't wearing some shimmering gown. She was dressed simply in a neat professional skirt suit, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Her eyes, though, were what caught him. They were clear, intelligent, and observed him not with awe, but with a quiet, almost analytical gaze. No starry-eyed flutter, no immediate blush, just a calm, steady look. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Presley," she said, her voice low and even. She offered a hand, and her grip was firm, not delicate. "Elvis, please," he corrected, a little thrown off his usual routine. "Pleased to meet you too, Clara." He tried his usual charm, the slight tilt of the head, the signature, half-smile. Clara's expression didn't change. She nodded, a small polite gesture, and then turned back to adjust something on her costume, checking a detail on a prop. Elvis watched her for a moment. This was new. Usually, they were already giggling or trying to catch his eye. Clara was focused on her work, seemingly oblivious to the aura of Elvis Presley. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity? "All right, everyone, let's block this scene," Peter called out. It was always good enough. "Cut. Let's try that again," Peter said. "Elvis, maybe a little more. Worry in your voice. Walter's truly desperate. You're the one holding the purse strings." They tried again. Elvis tried to conjure genuine worry, but it felt hollow. He was acting, but he wasn't feeling. He heard Clara's lines. She sounded professional. As they reset for a third take, Clara approached him quietly. "Mr. Presley," she began, and he braced himself for a compliment, perhaps a request for an autograph for her niece. "Elvis," he reminded her softly. "Elsie." She corrected herself, her gaze steady. "If I may, Walter, your character, he's a showman. He's used to charming his way out of trouble. But here he's cornered. What if, instead of just sounding worried, you let a tiny flicker of that showman frustration come through, like he's frustrated that his usual tricks aren't working on Betsy?" Elvis blinked. He stared at her. No one, not his directors, not his managers, not the colonel, had ever given him specific acting advice like that. Not real advice, beyond look more sad or be more angry. This was different. He's frustrated his tricks aren't working, Elvis repeated slowly, tasting the words. It made sense. It gave him something to latch onto, something real. Exactly, Clara said, a hint of warmth in her eyes. Betsy isn't swayed by charm. She's practical. That makes Walter's usual approach useless, and that's frustrating for someone like him. She didn't wait for a response. She simply nodded and walked back to her mark. Elvis stood there, a strange jolt running through him. She hadn't said, "Oh, you're so handsome, Elvis," or "I'm such a big fan." She'd given him an actual note on his acting, and it was a good note. A really good note. He felt a spark, tiny, almost forgotten spark, igniting somewhere deep inside. This wasn't just another pretty face. This wasn't just another day in the golden cage. This might be something else. He looked at Clara Hayes. Really looked at her, and wondered if this film might not be as forgettable as he'd initially thought. He straightened his shoulders. "Let's do this," he said to himself, a new determination in his voice. He had a character to explore and a co-star. The next few days on set were a revelation for Elvis. Clara Hayes continued to be an enigma. She was unfailingly polite, professional, and prepared. She knew her lines cold, hit her marks perfectly, and was always on time. But she never lingered, she never gossiped, and she certainly never tried to get closer to him in the way so many others did. He found himself observing her almost unconsciously. During breaks, while he was surrounded by his usual entourage, the Memphis Mafia, the publicists, the hangers-on, Clara would quietly find a spot to herself. Sometimes she read a book, a thick one, not a fan magazine. Sometimes she sat with a cup of tea just watching the organized chaos of the film set with a calm, almost serene expression. One afternoon they were filming a scene where Walter and Betsy were arguing about the Chautauqua show's dire financial state. It was a more heated exchange than their previous scenes. Elvis, despite Clara's earlier insights, found himself falling back into old habits, relying on his charisma rather than genuine anger or frustration. "Cut, Peter," the director yelled, sounding exasperated. "Elvis, we need more fire, more passion." Walters lied internally. He knew what Peter wanted, but it felt forced. How do you conjure passion on demand when you're utterly drained? He saw Clara walk up to him during the reset. He braced himself. Was she going to give him another encheval note? Or was this going to be the moment she finally asked for a picture? "Elvis," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "may I suggest something?" He nodded, curious. And it's anger that Betsy, the one person he relies on to keep things together, is being so reasonable. He wants her to fight for the dream too, even when it seems impossible. She paused, letting her words sink in. So instead of just general anger, try to infuse it with that desperation of a dreamer whose dream is being snatched away, and a touch of frustration that the person closest to him isn't joining him in that impossible fight. Elvis stared at her. It wasn't a lecture. It was like she'd stepped inside Walter's skin, understood his deepest motivations, and then handed him the key. She wasn't criticizing his performance. She was helping him understand the character better. "The dream," he murmured, testing the word. It resonated. He knew about dreams, about seeing them become distorted, about the frustration of others not seeing what you saw. "Yes," Clara confirmed, a small encouraging smile touching her lips. "The dream and the loneliness of being the only one still fighting for it." He looked at her, and in that moment he felt a flicker of something profound. Not just a connection between actor and character, but a connection between two people who understood the weight of expectation. "Thank you, Clara," he said, genuinely. It was the first time he'd said it with true sincerity. On this set, when they shot the scene again, something shifted. Elvis wasn't just acting angry. He was embodying Walter's desperate, almost childish plea for his dream to be understood and saved. There was a raw edge to his voice, a frantic energy in his movements that hadn't been there before. He wasn't just delivering lines, he was living them. And Clara's performance, too, seemed to deepen. Betsy wasn't just stern. She was weary, torn between her practical nature and her affection for Walter's undeniable, if unrealistic, optimism. Their scene crackled with a new kind of energy, a push and pull that felt real. Cut. That was it. Excellent. That's exactly what I wanted. Peter clapped his hands, beaming. "Elvis, Clara, fantastic work." Elvis felt a flush of pride, a feeling he hadn't associated with his movie work in years. It wasn't just that he'd done well. It was that he'd felt something. Truly. Felt it, and Clara had helped him get there during lunch. He found him on as usual, picking at a salad. He walked over a plate of chili in hand. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, feeling a little awkward. It had been so long since he'd just approached someone without his handlers orchestrating it. Clara looked up, a tiny surprise in her eyes. "Not at all, Elvis, please." She gestured to the empty seat beside her. He sat down, the metal chair creaking. "That was some good advice you gave me earlier," he said, not sure how to start a conversation. "Just trying to help," she replied simply. "We're all trying to tell a story, aren't we?" "Yeah," he agreed, stirring his chili. "Most times it feels like we're just selling a product, not telling a story." Clara looked at him, her expression soft. "I understand what you mean. It's easy to lose the art in the industry. But every now and then, if you're lucky, you find a moment or a scene, or even just a line where you can connect with something real. And that's what makes it worth it." He looked at her. She didn't sound preachy, she just sounded honest. It was refreshing. In a world full of yes men and people who just wanted a piece of him, Clara Hayes was different. She was a fellow artist, talking about the craft, not the celebrity. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the usual Hollywood buzz, Elvis felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find that lost artistry again. The more Elvis worked with Clara, the more he realized how profoundly different she was from anyone else in his orbit. She wasn't just professional. She had an intensity about her craft that was both inspiring and, at times, a little intimidating. She didn't seek his approval, didn't flatter him, and certainly didn't seem interested in the Elvis Presley circus. She was interested in the work, in the scene, in the characters. One afternoon, they were rehearsing a particularly emotional scene. Walter was supposed to confess his deep-seated fears to Betsy. Fears about his future, about losing everything. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for his character and by extension for Elvis himself. Elvis had always struggled with these kinds of scenes in his later films. They felt forced, insincere. His earlier roles, like in King Creole, had allowed for more raw emotion. The later scripts were so light, so saccharine, that real vulnerability felt out of place. He'd learned to gloss over it, to use his charm as a shield. He delivered the lines, his voice steady, his eyes conveying a practiced sadness. He thought it was convincing enough. He was Elvis after all. He could sell anything cut, Peter called out. But this time his voice wasn't exasperated. It was thoughtful. "Elvis, that was good, but I feel like there's more there." "Clara, what do you think?" Clara had been watching him intently. She didn't jump in with an immediate answer. She considered it, her brow furrowed slightly. "Elvis," she began, her voice soft but direct. "Walter, in this moment, he's not just sad, he's terrified, he's stripped bare, he's admitting his greatest weaknesses to the person he trusts most. Betsy. And that's a hard thing for a proud man to do. He nodded, listening intently. "You're showing sadness," she continued, "but you're not letting us see the fear underneath it. It's like Walter is still trying to put on a brave face, even for Betsy, but in this scene he can't. He can't afford to be brave anymore. He's at rock bottom." She paused, then added, "What if you let yourself feel that terror?" The shake in his voice, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his eyes might dart around. "Looking for me, the Psalm Mature Dindi." He felt it often alone in his mansion, surrounded by people that still so utterly solitary. He understood the desperate need to keep up appearances even when you were falling apart inside. This was different from just telling him to be more emotional. She was talking about the truth of the character's emotional state, the vulnerability that went beyond mere sadness. She was asking him to expose something raw, something he usually kept hidden, even from himself. He swallowed. "You want me to really go there?" Clara met his gaze. "Only if you think Walter would, and I think he would. He has to." It was a quiet challenge, not a demand, but an invitation to be truly authentic, to let go of the need to be perfect, to be Elvis. "All right," he said, his voice a little hoarse, "let's try it again." He walked back to his mark, the words Clara had spoken replaying in his mind. He's truly broken in this moment. He thought about his own fears, his own moments of feeling overwhelmed and alone. He thought about the pressure, the expectations, the constant performance. He let himself feel a sliver of that personal pain, that quiet desperation, and he channeled it into Walter when Peter called action. Elvis started the scene. His voice was no longer just sad. There was a slight tremor, a ragged edge to it. His eyes, instead of just looking mournful, darted around, betraying a deep-seated anxiety. His hands, usually so still and graceful, fidgeted slightly. He wasn't trying to be charming. He was simply being... He delivered the lines, his voice cracking slightly on one T word. It wasn't a planned crack. It was real, a genuine expression of fear and vulnerability. Clara, as Betsy reacted with a quiet strength, her eyes softening with understanding, not pity. She met his gaze, and in that moment it felt less like a scene and more like a real confession between two people. "Cut! Oh yes, that's it, Elvis, that's exactly it!" Peter almost shouted, his face alight with excitement. "That was magnificent! Clara, your reaction was perfect." Elvis felt a wave of exhaustion, but also a profound sense of release. It was hard, truly. Putting himself out there, letting a piece of his own hidden self into the character, but it felt right. It felt real. He looked at Clara. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. A tiny smile of acknowledgement, no gushing praise, no fanfare. Just a quiet understanding. And in that moment, he realized something. Clara wasn't just helping him act. She was helping him find himself again. She was pushing him to be brave, not just on screen, but within his own skin, and that he knew was a gift beyond measure. He felt a deep respect for her, and a growing warmth in his chest. She saw him, not the legend, but the man struggling beneath the weight of it all. And she was quietly, gently guiding him towards something more authentic. Elvis found himself actively seeking out Clara during breaks now. He'd bring his guitar sometimes, not to perform, but just to strum quietly, and he'd notice her observing him, not with the usual adoring gaze, but with a thoughtful expression. He started asking her about her background. "So, Clara, you ever done theater?" he asked one afternoon, watching her sketch something in a small notebook she always carried. She looked up, her pencil still. "Yes, a good deal of it actually, before I came out to Hollywood. Small productions, regional theaters." "That explains it," he mused. "You got a different way of looking at things. Most of the folks out here, they're all about the camera, the angles. You're about what's inside." Clara smiled faintly. "Theater demands a different kind of truth. There's no cutting away, no second takes in front of a live audience. You have to live it in real time every night. It teaches you to dig deep, To find the authentic pulse, Elvis repeated, liking the sound of it. That's what I used to feel like that. Sometimes when I was just starting out before it all got so big. He gestured vaguely at the bustling set. The huge production. He felt a rare comfort with her. A sense of ease that allowed him to drop his guard just a little. He felt safe expressing his disillusionment, his longing for something more. Clara never judged. She just listened, her intelligent eyes reflecting his words back to him. One day they were filming a light-hearted scene. A montage where Walter and Betsy were working together to save the show. A series of quick, funny moments. Elvis was supposed to be charming. He did it easily, flashing his famous smile, winking at the camera. It was his default setting. Cut. Perfect, Elvis. Right on, cue. Peter called out, but as Elvis walked past Clara, she leaned in slightly. He hadn't thought about that. He just focused on playing the charming rogue, but Clara was right. Even in their efforts, Walter and Betsy were still under immense pressure. The fun moments were a desperate attempt to ignore that pressure, to lift their own spirits. He thought about his own life. The endless tours, the constant demands, the need to be on all the time. Sometimes, even when he was laughing or performing, there was a deep weariness underneath it all. An exhaustion from constantly putting on a show. Weariness? He repeated softly. He looked at Clara, a profound understanding passing between them. She wasn't just talking about Walter anymore, she was talking about him. She saw the fatigue behind a smile. Exactly, she affirmed gently. It's the truth of the moment, and the truth is always more powerful than a performance. It was a subtle note, a quiet suggestion, but it hit him deeply. It wasn't about being a better actor in the superficial sense. It was about being a more honest one. It was about revealing the layers, even the hidden ones. From then on, Elvis started incorporating those small, subtle truths into his performance. A fleeting shadow in his eyes, a momentary pause before a laugh, a slight slump of his shoulders that quickly straightened. Other cast members and crew started to notice. Elvis seems more focused these days, someone commented. He's really getting into this role. Another said Peter, the director, was ecstatic. He's bringing something new to it. A depth I didn't expect. What they didn't know was that it wasn't some sudden artistic revelation. It was the quiet, unwavering influence of Clara Hayes. She didn't lecture. She didn't preach. She just offered observations, insights that resonated with him because she understood something about the human spirit, about the burden of dreams, about the exhaustion of constant performance that few others did. He realized she wasn't just observing his character, she was observing him. She saw past the legend, past the fame, past the entourage to the man inside. The man who was tired, who longed for authenticity, who yearned to be seen for more than just his voice or his looks. In a world that constantly demanded him to be Elvis Presley, the icon Clara Hayes offered him the rare gift of simply being Elvis, the man, and that he knew was more valuable than any box office record or gold album. He started to look forward to their scenes together, to their quiet conversations. On a film set that often felt like a factory, Clara Hayes was a sanctuary, a quiet place, where he could breathe and just be. The film schedule was grueling long days under the harsh studio lights, endless retakes, and the constant hum of production. For Elvis, it was often lonely, even surrounded by people. He'd retreat to his trailer. The silence, a stark contrast to the noise of the set, and the weight of his life would press down on him. One particularly tough day, they were filming a series of scenes back to back. Elvis was feeling drained emotionally and physically. His mind kept wandering to Priscilla back home, and the growing distance he felt from his life. Outside of the movie machine, the joy he once found in his craft seemed to evaporate with each passing hour. During a break, he slumped into a chair, trying to disappear into the script. He heard a soft knock on his trailer door. "Elvis, it's Clara. May I come in?" He straightened up, surprised. "Come on in, Clara." She entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might need this," she said simply, handing him a steaming cup. "Herbal? Good for weary souls." He took the cup, feeling a warmth spread through his hands. "Thanks, Clara. That's real thoughtful of you." She sat in the chair opposite him, not pressing, just sitting quietly. The air in the trailer, usually heavy with his own thoughts, seemed to lighten with her presence. "Long day, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft. "Seems like they're all long these days," he admitted, letting out a tired sigh. "Sometimes I just wonder what's it all for." It was a vulnerable admission, something he rarely said out loud, even to his closest friends. He was supposed to be the strong one, the modest one, always full of energy. Clara didn't offer platitudes. She didn't tell him he was lucky, or that he had everything. Instead, she just listened. After a moment, she said, "It's easy to lose sight of the purpose when you're caught in the current, especially when the current is so strong." "Yeah," he agreed, taking a sip of tea. It was soothing. "I used to love it, you know. The music, the performing, even the acting. Used to feel like I was reaching people, connecting." His voice was tinged with melancholy. "Now it just feels like a job, a very big, very demanding job." Clara nodded slowly. The bigger the stage, the harder it can be to find that genuine connection, the pressure to maintain the image, to always be on. It can stifle the very heart of what made you love it in the first place. Her words hit him with startling accuracy. She wasn't talking about the fame. She was talking about the burden of it, the way it suffocated the passion. "You get that, don't you?" he said, looking at her, a genuine relief washing over him. "I've seen it happen to many talented people," she replied. "The machine demands so much, sometimes it leaves nothing for the artist but the heart of the artist, that spark. It's still there. Isn't it just perhaps buried under all the expectations?" He looked down at his hands, turning the teacup slowly. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder." "It is," she assured him, her voice qualmy but certain. "I've seen it in your work here, in those moments when you let Walter truly feel his fear, his desperation. That's not just acting, Elvis. That's reaching for something real. That's your artistic heart. Still beating strong." She wasn't praising him superficially. She was acknowledging the effort, the authenticity, the very thing he longed to find again. She saw the man, the artist, beneath the layers of fame and expectation. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just sipping their tea. It was a rare, quiet moment, a bubble of peace amidst the chaos of the set. He didn't have to entertain her, didn't have to be Elvis Presley the king. He could just be Elvis, the man who felt lost and weary. And Clara just accepted him without judgment, without demand. He looked at her, truly grateful. "Thanks, Clara. Really, I needed to hear that." She smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. Sometimes all we need is a quiet moment and a reminder of why we started, and perhaps a good cup of tea. As she stood to leave, he felt a profound sense of connection to her. It wasn't a romantic connection or a friendship born of shared interest. It was something deeper. A shared understanding of the artistic struggle, the burden of performance, and the quiet courage it took to keep searching for truth amidst the artifice. Clara Hayes wasn't just a co-star. She was a beacon, a gentle reminder that the light of his own artistic spirit wasn't entirely extinguished. And that was a comfort he hadn't known, he desperately needed. The connection forged in the quiet of his trailer deepened over the following weeks. Clara continued to be his unconventional coach, not through grand pronouncements, but through subtle nudges and inchable observation. She had an uncanny ability to zero in on the core of a scene or a character's emotion, and her advice was always practical, always about grounding the performance in truth. One morning, They were working on a scene where Walter was supposed to be trying to convince a skeptical town council to invest in his Chautauqua show. It was a speech full of charisma and big ideas, but also a hint of desperation. Elvis delivered it with his usual gusto, selling the dream with his trademark charm. Cut. Fantastic Elvis, really selling it. Peter, the director, enthused. Moving on. But as the crew reset, Clara approached Elvis. Elvis, she began, her voice low. Walter is usually so good at reading people, at charming them. But the council, they're not swayed by charm, are they? They're practical. They've heard it all before. Elvis nodded. They're tough nuts to crack. Exactly, Clara said. So instead of just playing the charmy showman, what if you let a hint of Walter's own doubt show through, not enough to lose the council, but enough that we, the audience, see, they sure if his magic will work this time. Of flicker, of fifth dattered. It's talking big. Elvis considered it. It was a nuance he hadn't thought of. He usually just poured on the charm, making Walter seem invincible. Clara was suggesting that invincibility itself could be a performance, a shield. So like he's putting on a show for them. But he's also putting on a show for himself, Elvis asked, understanding dawning. Precisely, Clara affirmed. It adds layers. It makes him more human, more relatable. It's the difference between a character who always wins and a character who fights, even when he's terrified of losing. She was asking him to expose a deeper, not just sadness or fear, but the internal battle between outward confidence and inward doubt. It was challenging, but he found himself eager to try. Let's do one more. Take on that last part, Elvis called out to Peter, surprising everyone. Usually, Elvis was ready to move on. Peter looked surprised, but readily agreed. Sure. Elvis, if you've got something else in mind, let's see it. Elvis walked back to his mark, and as Peter called action, he began the speech again. This time, his smile was a little too bright, a little too fixed. His eyes, though still engaging, held a subtle flicker of anxiety. There was a microscopic tremor in his voice when he spoke of the future, quickly masked by a booming conviction. He was still the showman, but beneath the surface, the audience could almost feel Walter's desperate internal struggle. He finished, and the room was quiet for a moment. Even the crew seemed to hold their breath. Cut, my God, Elvis, Peter exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. That was truly remarkable. The depth you found there. It was powerful. Elvis felt a surge of artistic satisfaction, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just the director's praise. It was the quiet nod from Clara across the set, a subtle acknowledgement that he had hit the mark, that he had dared to go deeper. She wasn't just a co-star. She was his artistic confidant, his quiet mentor. She saw things in his performances that no one else did, and she gently pushed him to explore them. She helped him rediscover the joy of the craft of truly embodying a character, of finding the truth in every moment, no matter how small. During another break, Elvis was fiddling with his guitar, humming a gospel tune. Clara walked over, pausing. That's beautiful, Elvis, she said softly. He looked up, a little self-conscious. Just an old spiritual. Reminds me of home. You have such a gift, she continued. Not talking about his voice, but about the depth of feeling he put into it. It's in your acting, too, when you let it come through, that raw, honest emotion. Colonel Parker wants me to stick to the formula, Elvis confessed, a flash of frustration in his eyes. Sing the songs, kiss the girl, ride off into the sunset, he says. That's what people want. Clara sat down beside him. Perhaps that's what they think they want, but what they truly connect with is authenticity. The real human experience. Elvis, not just popular. Her words resonated deeply. It wasn't about defying the Colonel. Not yet. It was about his own artistic integrity. Clara was showing him that the path to true artistry wasn't about bigger numbers or flashier performances. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and daring to be real. He looked at her truly, seeing her, appreciating her. Clara Hayes, the quiet, unassuming actress, was changing his perspective, helping him remember why he fell in love with performing in the first place. She was reminding him that the golden cage might be big, but it didn't have to completely suffocate the bird inside, and for that he was immeasurably grateful. As filming entered its final weeks, Elvis found himself increasingly drawn to Clara's calm presence. His life outside the set was, as always, chaotic. The demands of fame, the constant touring, the endless business meetings orchestrated by Colonel Parker, the distance growing between him and Priscilla, it all weighed heavily on him. He felt stretched thin, and sometimes the sheer loneliness of his unique existence became unbearable. One evening, after a particularly draining day of filming, Elvis returned to his trailer feeling utterly despondent. He had just finished a phone call with Priscilla that had left him feeling more alone than ever. He missed her, but the pressures of his career seemed to be pulling them further and further apart. He wanted to call his mother Gladys, but she was gone, and the ache of her absence was a constant companion. He sat in the dark, the quiet, broken only by the distant hum of the studio. He felt a desperate need for understanding, for someone to see him, the man, not the legend. Suddenly there was a soft knock on his trailer door. He sighed, expecting one of the guys from the Memphis Mafia, coming to check on him. "Yeah?" he called out, his voice tired. "Clara, Elvis." Her voice floated through the door, gentle and concerned. "Are you all right? I saw you leave the set." He hesitated. He usually kept his vulnerabilities locked away, especially from co-stars. But with Clara, it felt different. She had already seen so much of him, the parts he rarely showed. "Come on in," he said, switching on a small lamp. Clara entered, her expression soft, perceptive. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just looked at him, and somehow her gaze conveyed a deep, quiet empathy. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice low. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Something like that? Just tired of it all. Sometimes the pressure, the expectations feels like I'm always on a treadmill, and I can't step off." She sat down, not too close, just offering a silent, comforting presence. "It must be incredibly difficult to live under that kind of spotlight constantly." "You have no idea," he mumbled, a bitterness creeping into his voice. "Everyone wants a piece of you. Everyone's got an opinion. No one just sees you." He looked at her, then his eyes searching hers. "Except maybe you, Clara." A flicker of something in her eyes. A recognition. "It's hard to find authenticity when you're constantly performing," she said gently. "But it's there, Elvis, in you. You just need moments to reconnect with it." He found himself pouring out some of his frustrations. Not details about his personal life, but the general feeling of being suffocated by his fame, by the demands of the Colonel, by the formulaic movies, by the constant travel. He spoke of his yearning to do more serious acting, to make music that truly mattered, not just what was commercially viable. Clara listened without interrupting, without judgment. She didn't offer solutions, or tell him what he should do. She just bore witness to his struggle, and that in itself was a profound comfort. "It's lonely, isn't it?" she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "To be at the top, to have so much, and yet feel so utterly alone." Her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. Yes, that was it, the loneliness. Profound, aching loneliness that no amount of fame or adoration could fill. For the first time, he felt truly understood, not just as an artist, but as a human being grappling with an impossible existence. "Yeah," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, it is." He looked at her, tears blurring his vision for a moment. Hiada didn't flinch. She just held his gaze, her empathy radiating outwards. "Takes courage, Elvis," she said, her voice soft but firm, "to keep searching for truth, to keep pushing for authenticity. when the world demands something else from you, but it's worth it for your own soul. Her words were a lifeline. She was acknowledging his pain, but also reminding him of his strength, of the artist he still was, the truth seeker he longed to be. They sat in silence for a while longer, a comfortable shared quietude. She didn't try to fix him or cheer him up. She just was there. And in that stillness, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Clara Hayes wasn't just a good actress. She was a truly good person, with a deep well of understanding. When she finally stood to leave, she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Hang in there, Elvis. The heart always finds its way back to what truly matters." He watched her go, and for the first time in days, he didn't feel quite so alone. Clara had given him a profound gift, the gift of being truly seen and truly understood, without judgment or expectation. She had acknowledged his golden cage, but reminded him that the bird inside still had a song, if only he dared to sing it for himself. The days after Clara's quiet visit to his trailer marked a subtle but profound shift in Elvis. He still carried the weight of his life, the pressures, the loneliness, but now he also carried a spark of renewed purpose. Clara had helped him remember what it felt like to genuinely care about the work, to strive for something more than just good enough. He approached his scenes with a fresh energy. He wasn't just hitting his marks and delivering lines. He was exploring Walter, finding new nuances, playing with emotions in ways he hadn't dared to before. He started asking Peter, the director, for extra takes, surprising the crew. "Let's try that again, Peter," he'd say, a glint in his eye. "I think Walter would hold that a bit longer. Let the doubt linger." Or, "What if he tries to hide his disappointment here, but it just bubbles up for a second?" Peter was delighted. "Elvis, you're on fire." "This is incredible." The set buzzed with a different kind of energy. Crew, used to the routine, now watched with keen interest as Elvis transformed his performance. He wasn't just the charming star. He was an actor truly dedicated to his craft. Clara, in their scenes together, met him every step of the way. When he pushed himself, she pushed herself. Their on-screen chemistry wasn't just about romance or flirtation. It was about two characters and two actors, navigating challenges and finding genuine connection. Their dialogue crackled with a new depth born of their real-life camaraderie and shared artistic ambition. One afternoon, they were filming a scene where Walter and Betsy finally achieve a small victory, a moment of triumph for their struggling Chautauqua show. It was meant to be joyous, triumphant. Elvis played it with exuberance, but also subtly with that underlying weariness Clara had pointed out weeks ago. The relief was palpable, but so was the exhaustion of the fight. As they finished the scene, Peter called, "Perfect. That's a wrap on this sequence." Elvis turned to Clara, a genuine, unpracticed smile on his face. "We did it, Clara." She smiled back, her eyes bright. "We did, Elvis, and it felt real." "It was real," he said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He looked around the set at the crew at the artificial fairground. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was just punching a clock. He felt like he had created something, truly created it, alongside someone who genuinely cared about the process. During a lunch break, he pulled out his guitar. Instead of just strumming idly, he started playing a melody he'd been working on. It was a bluesy tune with a raw, almost melancholic feel. It wasn't a catchy pop song. It was a song that came from a deeper place. Clara was nearby, reading her book, but she paused, listening. He sang the lyrics softly, words about searching, about truth, about finding your way home. "Thanks," he said, a little self-conscious. "It's just something I put together. It's more than just something." She countered gently. "It's you speaking your truth. Don't ever lose that, Elvis. Don't let anyone tell you that you can only sing a certain kind of song or play a certain kind of part. The world needs to hear your truth, not just what they expect." Her words resonated deeply. Clara wasn't just his acting coach. She was an advocate for his soul. She saw the true artist within him, the one struggling to break free from the constraints of fame. She encouraged his authenticity, not just on screen, but in his music, in his life. He realized that Clara Hayes had done something extraordinary for him. She hadn't fallen for his charm, hadn't asked for favors, hadn't tried to use him. Instead, she had treated him as an equal, a fellow artist, and in doing so had given him back a piece of himself, he thought, was lost forever. He felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. This film, which had started as another dreary obligation, had become something meaningful, all because of Clara. She had quietly, patiently reminded him of his passion, of his depth, of the power of his own vulnerability. And he knew with absolute certainty that no matter what came next, he would never forget her. She had shown him that even in the golden cage there was still room for a true song. The last days of filming were bittersweet. Elvis found himself clinging to every moment on set with Clara. Their conversations had become more open, more personal, though always respectful, and always centered around the deep well of human experience that fueled their craft. He learned about her love for classic literature, her quiet life outside of Hollywood, her philosophical approach to acting. She in turn continued to be the quiet, discerning listener to his frustrations and aspirations. On the final day of filming, there was a bittersweet atmosphere. Cast and crew exchanged farewells, signed autographs, and took pictures. Elvis went through the motions, smiling, shaking hands, but his eyes kept searching for Clara. They had one last scene together, a short, poignant exchange, where Walter and Betsy share a look of understanding about the future of their show. It was simple. No dialogue, just a shared glance that spoke volumes about their journey together. "Action!" Peter called. Elvis looked at Clara. In her eyes he saw not just Betsy's understanding, but Clara's own quiet empathy, her genuine warmth. He let himself infuse Walter's gaze with his own gratitude, his own profound respect for this woman who had seen him, truly seen him when so few others did. Clara met his gaze with equal measure, a gentle acknowledgement of their shared journey. Cut! That's a wrap on Elvis Presley and Clara Hayes. And that's a wrap on the trouble with girls. Peter's voice boomed, full of finality. Elvis smiled, but his heart felt a pang. It was over. The structure, the routine, and most importantly, the daily connection with Clara would all end now. He walked over to her, pushing through the well-wishers. "Clara," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. She turned her usual calm expression, tinged with a hint of melancholy. "Elvis, it's been an experience," he chuckled softly. "An experience, huh? That's one way to put it." He paused, searching for the right words. "Clara, I want to thank you, not just for being a great co-star, though you are, but for everything else. For the advice, for the insights, for helping me remember what it feels like to be an actor again, to truly feel something. You saw through all the noise, didn't you? You saw me and you pushed me to be better. Not just as a performer, but as a person." He realized he was being unusually open, but he didn't care. She deserved to know. Clara's gaze softened even further. A rare, tender smile touched her lips. "You already had it in you, Elvis. All I did was remind you. And it's been an honor, truly, to witness your dedication, your artistry. You have a profound gift far beyond what people usually see." She paused, then continued, "Don't let the industry take that from you. Hold on to that truth. It's what makes you extraordinary." He felt a lump in his throat. Her words, blessing. She wasn't fawning over the king. She was recognizing the artist, the man, and encouraging him to cherish that inner fire. He reached out and gently took her hand, squeezing it softly. "Thank you, Clara, for everything. You too, Elvis," she said, her grip firm in return. "Keep singing your own song, the real one." Then, as the crew and other cast members started to converge for farewells, she gave him a small, knowing nod, a final, quiet communication that transcended words. "Farewell, Elvis." She turned and began to walk away, blending into the crowd, her usual calm demeanor intact. He watched her go, a profound sense of loss and gratitude swirling within him. He knew he might never see her again. Their paths were so different. She was a quiet, unassuming talent who valued authenticity. He was a global phenomenon, trapped in a gilded cage. But she had left an indelible mark. She had opened his eyes, reminded him of his forgotten self, and shown him that true connection could exist even in the most artificial of environments. Clara Hayes hadn't been a lover or a celebrity friend. She had been a quiet catalyst, a profound influence, who had helped him rediscover his artistic soul. As he walked off the set, for the last time, the cheers and farewells of the crew fading behind him, he knew that Clara Hayes would forever hold a unique place in his heart. She wasn't just a co-star. She was the one who had seen him, truly seen him, when he needed it most. And the surprising reason he would always call her his favorite was simple. She taught him how to breathe again, how to act with truth, and how to believe in the artist within. Years passed. Elvis's career continued its tumultuous path. More movies, more records, more tours. The golden cage grew heavier, more ornate, and harder to escape. The 1970s brought highs and lows, a triumphant return to live performance, but also the escalating pressures of fame, the demands of the Colonel, and the personal struggles that would ultimately define his later years. Through it all, the memory of Clara Hayes remained a quiet, powerful presence in his mind. He never saw her again after the trouble with girls. She pursued her own path, perhaps returning to theater or finding smaller, more meaningful roles. Their lives were worlds apart. But whenever he felt that familiar gnawing ache of disillusionment, that feeling of being a puppet on a string, he would remember Clara. He would remember her calm eyes, her unwavering honesty, her quiet challenges. He remembered her words. The heart of the artist, that spark, it's still there. And don't let anyone tell you that you can only sing a certain kind of song or play a certain kind of part. Those words became a mantra, a silent rebellion against the constant pressure to conform. In his concerts, he started to push boundaries, especially in the 1970s. He sang his heart out, truly sang, letting the raw emotion pour out, infusing his performances with an intensity that went beyond mere showmanship. He put more of himself, the real vulnerable Elvis, into every note. He might not have made the serious dramatic films he once dreamed of, but the lessons Clara taught him permeated his live performances. He sought that authentic pulse in every song, every gesture on stage. He aimed for truth, even when he was physically or emotionally drained. When he thought back on all the beautiful, talented women he'd worked with in Hollywood, the glamorous leads, the charming injues, they were all wonderful in their own ways. He had shared laughter, chemistry, and even brief romances. With some, none of them had touched him in the profound, artistically vital way that Clara Hayes had. The others had seen Elvis Presley, the star. Clara had seen Elvis Presley, the artist, the man who yearned for more, the soul struggling within the golden cage. She hadn't been captivated by his fame. She had been captivated by the potential for truth in his performance. She hadn't wanted anything from him, except for him to be real, and that was the surprising reason. It wasn't about romance or beauty or even the on-screen spark. It was about pure, unadulterated artistic respect and personal growth. It was about being seen, truly seen, for the man beneath the legend. One late night, much later in his life, Elvis sat alone in Graceland, flipping through old movie stills. He stopped on a picture from The Trouble with Girls. There he was in character. Standing gaze, her calm demeanor. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Clara," he whispered. The name, a warm, familiar echo in the vast, silent room. "You really saw me, didn't you?" She didn't gush. She gave him the hard truth, the kind of honest feedback that only a true colleague and equal could provide. She saw the weariness behind the charm, the fear beneath the bravado, and she gently, persistently nudged him towards finding the truth in his art again, helping him unlock parts of himself he'd forgotten existed. She reminded him that the golden cage might limit his choices, but it couldn't steal his soul, not if he fought for it. She helped him remember that the king could still be an artist, even if just for himself. She had been the quiet anchor in a sea of chaos, the unexpected guide who helped him navigate the treacherous waters of his own fame. Elvis closed his eyes, the image of Clara clear in his mind. He knew deep in his heart that of all the people he'd ever shared a screen with, of all the faces that had flashed across the silver screen beside him, Clara Hayes was his favorite co-star. Not for the typical reasons, but for the most profound one of all. She helped him remember who he truly was, and what truly mattered, in a world that constantly tried to make him forget. And for that, he would be forever grateful. The echo of her quiet challenge, her gentle empathy, and her unwavering belief in his deepest artistic truth resonated within him, a silent, comforting presence, until the very end.